I'm a biologist. I work as a consultant for a large industrial firm. I don't consider myself a breakthrough working there because what happened to me should be happening to any woman who had the qualifications. I had to literally lie myself into the job. I had to say, you don't have to worry with me and my children. I'll never make my children come between me and the duties of the job. I had to say that. And how I've had to keep up to that is to take my vacation or lie and say I'm sick when the children need looking after. It's not too bad now because they're bigger, but before that it was just absolutely terrible.
While Jamaica is called a developing country, how would you compare Jamaica and Canada in terms of child care and society's provisions for children?
I'd say Canada is behind. It's, from that point of view, I wouldn't call it a developing country. It sticks by the principle that the future of a nation is with the good development of youth, and therefore it provides services to accomplish that. And this I find in Canada, they say the same thing, but it's lip service. Because if the future of the nation depends on the youth, then where are the services for the youth, really? You have to be well off here to have children. Otherwise, you are tied down to them and you stay home with them. And for the time I've had children in Canada, which is 10 years now, I've had always to make my own arrangements or forfeit a lot of my freedom to have them looked after. And some of the ways and means I've had them looked after are really uncanny, really undesirable. But what could I do? I had to survive. Especially when I became a widow, I just had to survive. And the places I've had to leave them, especially when I was studying, when I didn't have much money. I used to be ashamed, but now I think I should publicize these deficiencies in the society so that something can be done. And this is what I would like women to do, to sort of publicize the undesirable ways they've had to cope with the problem of having children and working or studying or whatever. And this service need not be for working mothers only. It just has to be for mothers, because mothers are people. To have a child is just a biological happening. I mean, it doesn't have to be the end of your life, for heaven's sake. And you don't have to be punished because you just happen to be the sex which bears them. You know, and life doesn't stop when you just have children. It goes on. And it's a real shame that such services haven't been provided, because I've found that the women who have been able to break out of this role-playing habit, I find they have a lot of potential. They are very creative and very mentally alert. They just didn't have the opportunity to create or to develop their mental capabilities. And it's a real shame. Some of them are beginning to do it at 40 after their children are more independent or away from home or something. But just consider, between 20 and 40, a whole 20 years out of your life is gone because you couldn't do better. And who says the home necessarily is the best place to rear children? And it certainly isn't the schools either, because schools don't teach how to relate to each other. They only teach you how to compete with each other. And I feel that daycare centers would do a lot to help children to relate to each other, because competition breeds animosity most of the time and aggressiveness. Whereas when you learn or you're in an environment where the stress is on just relating, just being, and just being with each other, then you get cooperation rather than competition. And you get love rather than aggressiveness, or the fighting spirit is somehow, placed in the background. So apart from the fact that it is discrimination towards women, the lack of daycare centers. It's a positive thing that is needed in any society, any modern society, especially in a city environment. And the day camps, that's another thing. That's geared for the bourgeois, the high class society. They begin at 9:30, 10 in the morning, and they end at 3:30, 4 in the afternoon. Now tell me which company starts really a regular day, 10 in the morning and ends at. It's not geared for the working mother. It's geared for the mother who stays home. And it's not solving the problem. The powers that be do know that mothers work, and mothers want to work, and mothers feel frustrated staying at home, but they turn a deaf ear, as they've always done to women, especially when societies are changing. They never are anxious to reckon with the voice of women, never.
And where they really need to either support themselves and their children, or else to supplement a family income that's rather small.
The median annual income for women in Canada, from all sources, is $4,800. For men, $9,700. Almost 1/4 of working women earn less than $3,000 a year, compared with fewer than 10% of working men.
I personally don't know any women or any mothers who work for the fun of it. They work because they must.
Women represent more than 1/3 of the labor force, and more than 1/3 of all married women work outside their homes, 75% of them full-time. Additionally, over 250,000 working women are widowed, separated, or divorced. There still is at least an unconscious belief that women all have someone else to support them. Yet significantly more women than men support elderly parents, and less than 1/6 of single-parent families are headed by men. Those fathers have an average income of 70% more than does the average woman in the same position. In fact, almost half of mother-led families exist on incomes that fall below the level described as the poverty line.
You all often hear the comment made that women are getting out of the house and going to work because that's really the easier way out. And if you stop to look at what goes into a day for a woman who both works and looks after her family, I think that's an argument that's very easily refuted.
On the average, a mother of 2 who also works outside her home puts in a work week of 100 hours. And the occupations that employ numbers of women tend to be the most boring, ill-paid ones. Of course, many men have tedious jobs too, but they are better paid, and very few men go home to do more of the same kind of thing, to respond to all the things implied by questions like, what's for supper? Are there any clean socks? Where did you put my skates?
I think ideally a family consists of a mother that's home, a father that's working, and the children who come home to a good home. But we got to be practical these days and go along with the times. And the times, in these times, the mothers are working. Many of them must work.
For the 1,380,000 children under 14 whose mothers work outside their homes, there are only 1,200 centers to provide care for them in the whole country. And as only 89 of these are solely publicly supported, child care reduces a mother's income yet further. The much heralded tax deduction for child care? Well, you can deduct what amounts to between 1/4 and 1/3 of what you actually have to pay, and you don't get it back. It's just that isn't taxed anymore as clear income.
May I take a message? I mean, he won't be back before 5, but...
Women in slightly better paid jobs in more comfortable surroundings still do things uncannily like housework, doing things for other people, organizing things for them, remembering things for them, serving them, cleaning up after them.
National Film Board?
And like housework, there are constant interruptions, as though what you're doing can't really be very important.
It seemed to me that there was much more almost subjugation of the woman in Canada. This still applies. How many women doctors have we got in Canada? How many women have we got encouraged to go as doctors? How many women lawyers do we have? Isn't there still a kind of prejudice against women in these fields?
Though more women than men finish high school, and there is a direct relationship between the amount of education and the rate of employment, that relationship does not ordinarily extend to salary or the kind of work done if you're a woman. Many women with university degrees do work that can only be described as routine and intellectually unchallenging. Even when women are doing substantially the same work as men, other factors seem to enter the picture. In department stores, women are hired to staff the notions counters and sell items of little value, while the merchandise that brings a commission is sold by men.
Normal, delicate, permanent press or normal sanitized cycle. To operate this, it's very simple. You only push a button of the fabric you're drying, if it's normal or delicate, and then you go to the fully automatic cycle.
Some women do work in professions which utilize their training or talents. 10% of employed women have incomes over $8,000 a year, compared to 41% of men.
Well, they haven't identified the problem.
Everybody's satisfied? Try?
Would you like to do something else connected?
Even if you're lucky enough to do better than just break even after paying for childcare, there are still dilemmas specific to the situation of mothers. Some are the result of circumstances like no adequate childcare services available. Some are the result of our conditioning, which has taught us to feel guilty at leaving our children, whether by necessity or choice.
And in the meantime, when I did work, I had to have a lady come in and take care of the house and do everything for me and take care of the child. But I found that it wasn't good enough because I was missing out on the growth of my child. I'd come home from work and I play with him, but it's time for him to go to bed. And I get up 6 o'clock in the morning and the maid comes in and I'm gone and I don't see him and she's enjoying him, but he's mine, you know, and I didn't get to enjoy him. So finally, after a year and a half, I decided it was, I better pack it up and stay home for a while. And I'm glad I did. So.
You were telling me about some other feelings you had, though.
Oh, yes, after I quit, I had regrets because I loved my work. And it was a career, and I resented my son very, very much. I loved him, but I resented him because he was a barrier, you know, keeping me from doing what I wanted to do.
Do you think that it might have been a solution to have worked half-time?
It may have, because I was with him constantly. Being a working mother and not being in contact with children so much, why, it gets, you know, very, very depressing and very boring after a while. What to do with yourself all day. You have a whole day and you have one child. Now, what do you do?
It doesn't bother me, really. But the way the situation is now, especially developing the farm and all that, we do need extra money, which I think I feel obligated at times to go out and help. Other than that, I do like to stay home and look after my own children instead of having a babysitter.
How do you feel that would affect you professionally, you know, when your children are grown up and don't need you?
Oh, well, that will affect me professionally because new technologies and new drugs and new techniques are developed in nursing, which is going to set me back in years, and it will be difficult to catch up. Of course, there are opportunities of refreshing courses and all that. But on the other hand, when I can work part-time, as long as it doesn't affect the family life, I think I'll keep up working.
We have got to, all over the world, have smaller families. And this would mean when girls are marrying young, by the time they're 30, they have reached the stage where their work, their children are no longer so demanding. And they have all that rest of their life to face. And if they can keep working, if they have some place to look after their children, they can keep their interest up. I can't think of anything worse than reaching the stage of about 30 years old and being cut loose from the world, having no further purpose in life, to just keep house.
I've always felt that women have the right to choose whether they shall work at home full-time, this is if they have children, or whether they will work out at a career or a job full-time, or whether or not their life shall be a mixture of both. Now, I suspect that most women will want that pattern, but I think that the other pattern ought to be possible too. If, as in France, a woman with small children wants her entire time at home to devote to bringing them up, I think that the state should find ways and means of reimbursing her with a salary to make that possible.
The female role, as it is an honorable role, right? It is the role which brings children into the world and which rears them and takes care of them, right? Which gives up all that it has to give to make sure that other members of humanity can live and grow. You can't want anything better than that. What I quarrel with is the notion that that is all that women are supposed to do, right? And the notion that a woman should surrender all intellectual abilities just to do that. That is the quarrel. You aren't quarreling with that role. Women will always be having children, and I wouldn't like them to stop loving them.
I personally, when I went back to working, I was working when we were married, and I went back because we needed extra money. But that wasn't the only thing. There's the feeling that one gets tired of, after being reasonably well educated, one gets tired of just dishes and diapers, and also one gets tired of not knowing what anybody's talking about, being out of things. And I've found from a personal satisfaction, I'm sure I have been a better wife and a better mother because I've had outside interests of my own. I haven't had to be possessive with my children or too aggressive with my husband because I was a person in my own right.
And this I found very difficult to reconcile, like as a young married woman, for instance, coming to North America, because you hear about the role a woman is supposed to play. So I started off my marriage playing the role a woman is supposed to play, in as much as I was not brought up in an environment where people play roles or members of the family play roles. And it caused a lot of conflict until finally there was a crisis, and my husband just told me I didn't want you to, if I knew you wanted to just have children and wash dishes and whatever, that was my idea of marriage.
I think that women are increasingly taking a pride, not in being a kept woman or a parasite, but in being able to go out and take up a career, or even to do part-time work outside. All kinds of arrangements are very slowly being made. There's one very able young lawyer here in one of the federal departments who has an arrangement with her department where she works. She works 40% of the time and gets 40% of the income. She's able then to spend the other time at home with her children. Her husband also is a professional man, and consequently their family is well fixed financially. But you see, I think that women are beginning to realize that just to be a clothes horse and a jewel displayer is not good enough, or even a playgirl or a playmate or something, that's not good enough. That today, people are beginning to demand that women use their heads as well as the rest of their equipment.